The post-apocalyptic tycoon was reborn into modern times, inheriting the legacy and becoming the world's richest man at the beginning, but as a result, his spiritual energy was revived. Evolutionary monsters roar in the world, revived evil spirits bleed and reign supreme, and the mechanical awakening of steel awakens extraordinary will. Twisted gods descend from foreign lands, corrupt pollutants run rampant, and undead alien species offer sacrifices to sentient beings. Others believe that he will be a mastermind behind the scenes, secretly manipulating the world order and enjoying life comfortably, but, both cats and dogs want to dominate, have you asked me? Are you trying to rewrite the order of the new era? Your entire organization, combined with me, is not capable of fighting alone. Today I'll tell you a lesson. No matter how times change, your dad will always be your dad. In the new era, the transcendent PK, the god Cthulhu, the online butcher god of the irascible tycoon. This book is also known as, the richest man in this class is too irritable, I can slaughter gods with money, and, I want to kill the whole world even though I can be the mastermind behind the scenes. Physical book authors are fishing to write online articles, with stable updates and quality assurance. Keywords of the novel. The spiritual era of money-powered people with no pop-ups, the spiritual era of money-powered people with full collection download, the latest chapter reading of the spiritual era of money-powered people. Chapter 1. Do you want to kill me? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Do you want to kill me? Above the sky, the spacious interior of a private plane. Alone, do you want to kill me? The 16-year-old boy sat on a spacious and soft leather seat, propped up his chin with one hand, half lowered his eyes, and kicked the man curled up under his feet with his toes. You can also be considered an old man in the group. You have been working with the Yen family for more than 10 years, and you have always been loyal. Why did you suddenly become obsessed and want to kill me, the prince with a red root? And who is the person behind you? Who sent you here? The man lying on the ground was kicked to the wound in his chest and abdomen, and immediately took a deep breath of air. He instinctively wanted to scream and curse, but the young man in front of him didn't lift his eyes and kicked again. This time, he used more force than before, directly causing the knife that had pierced his abdomen to penetrate deeply, making his eyes black, and he passed out. Young master, he was knocked unconscious by your kick, the subordinate standing next to the young man kindly reminded. Really? But I didn't use too much force, said the crown prince of the Yen family with a pursed lips. Actually, I know that even if he doesn't say it, it's just those old people who see my father dying and want to get rid of me, the only heir, in order to divide up my father's inheritance. But I still want to ask, who exactly is behind him? He stood up from his seat, with a hint of fierce malice, and his hard-soled leather boots deliberately ran over the unconscious man's fingers. The man on the ground was in excruciating pain and woke up. Reluctantly lifting his head, he looked at Yen Luge with a smile on his face. His eyes were no longer filled with the previous disdain, only with deep fear. The group said that this young master, who rarely appears, is an uneducated and inexperienced playboy who only relies on the protection of his father's generation to become a proud and arrogant spendthrift, so that he has the courage to rise up evil intentions. But what he didn't expect was that before he decided to take action, just because he couldn't conceal his inner resentment and glanced at the other person more, without showing any complete hostility, the seemingly unsuspecting young man who was enjoying afternoon tea suddenly erupted and mercilessly inserted a knife and fork stained with yellow oil into his stomach. He hasn't even had a chance to take action yet. This is simply a violent thug who doesn't play cards according to common sense and doesn't take human life seriously. The man lay in a pool of blood, feeling the passing of life bit by bit. With a mixture of despair, frustration, and resentment, he looked at Yan Lvgu and struggled to say, no one instructed me. Yen Lvgu, it's you, damn it. You damn it. Yen Lvage felt inexplicable and said, have I ever done anything wrong to you? The man's breath on the ground gradually weakened. It was you who killed Yaina. Yen Luge became even more fascinated and looked at his subordinates with a pleading gaze. Who is Yaina? The subordinate standing behind him coughed lightly and explained, previously, you asked me to dispose of those old things that conspired against you, and falsely caused accidents such as car accidents and fires. If I remember correctly, one of the old men's daughters, named Ainagaya, was included in our assassination list because she was also involved in the conspiracy and died in an ordinary car accident 3 days ago. The Aaron who is preparing to harm you now is Ainagaya's former ex-boyfriend. So he came to seek revenge on me. Yes. Remember to cut down the grass and root next time you work. I don't want these little brats to dance in front of me again. Understood. So, are you the one who started with you? All subordinates observe the nose, and heart, and do not make any comments on the violent remarks of their own small boss. That Ainagaya, said Yen Luge. How are her ex-boyfriend, and current boyfriend? Her ex-boyfriend unfortunately blew herself up yesterday at home with homemade explosives. The ex-boyfriend died suddenly at home the day before yesterday due to excessive sadness. The current boyfriend is a woman who tried to plastic surgery herself into the shape of Yaina the day before yesterday, but the surgery failed and he died in a medical accident. Yen Luge fell into a brief silence and turned his head to look at the man on the ground who was gasping for breath. You should also hurry to the underworld and be your ex-girlfriend's concubine, right? I think you can move faster, otherwise wearing a green hat won't catch up with the heat. He spat so much that the man in the pool of blood listened, didn't lift it up in a breath, and fainted again. Yen Luge yawned and said, Are you dead? Oh, you're not dead yet, but it looks like it's getting faster. The subordinates looked at him together, hesitating to speak. What's wrong? There's only one small issue, said the subordinate who seemed to be the most trusted by Yen Luge. Aaron is the captain of our plane and the only pilot. What about our co-pilot? 4 days ago, we were cleared by our people for participating in a conspiracy against you. So, he's dead and our plane is about to lose control, right? I have to say, yes. Yen Luge remained silent for a while, then turned her head to look at one of her subordinates and said seriously, I remember you quite enjoyed playing flight simulation games. Playing games and flying a real plane are 2 different things. Boss. And I'm not playing well at all. No, what I mean is, when the finance minister is nagging in my ear, why does the young master crash a car or a plane? Help me explain to her that learning how to fly an airplane is quite difficult for beginners, both in games and in reality, so it's normal for me to let it crash instead of wasting time rescuing it. It seems like he can drive it if he wants, but at the moment, he's just not going to learn in a hurry. Boss, we actually have another option, the subordinate suggested with courage. We can first rescue Aaron and let him land the plane at a nearby airport before killing him. Let someone who wants to kill me live an extra 10 minutes. No, that's not my style. Yen Luge refused without hesitation, and are you sure he won't suddenly have a brain twitch and die with me? After his subordinate stepped down, Yen Luge grabbed one foot of the man on the ground and dragged him to the side of the plane's hatch. Bang, he unlocked and opened the hatch 3 times, kicked out the heavy hatch with 1 foot, and also threw out the man rushing for favor. In the pouring strong wind, the young man leaned out, leaning against the cold current at an altitude of 10,000 meters, holding the metal pole next to the cabin door in one hand and the parachute bag in the other, squinting his eyes as if enjoying or intoxicated. Looking back at the subordinates who were swayed by the wind, Yen Luge grinned and said, Have you all taken skydiving classes before? I hope you haven't forgotten. Come and meet me after landing, you know the location. As for me, I'll take a step first. Before anyone could respond, he let go of his hand. Yen Luge fell into the clouds. At first, it was a rapid descent, but soon after, gravity and resistance reached equilibrium, and the body began to descend at a uniform speed. The sense of weightlessness became less pronounced, as if lying on soft cotton. Yen Lv opens her arms facing down, as if embracing this world. Speaking of which, this seems to be my first serious parachute jump in this world. By the way, how should the parachute open? Let me find the instructions first. A few minutes later, Yen Lv, who fell into the primitive forest, cut off the umbrella rope, put his hands in his pockets, hummed and walked out, as if he was on an outing. But within a few minutes of walking, he collided head-on with a team of fully armed men and horses. That group of people have a fierce face, full of tattoos, and they don't seem to be good people. They also drive through uninhabited mountains and forests, seemingly transporting something illegal. I was just thinking. It's quite challenging to hike out of the forest, and I'm sure I'll be late. I can't even see my dad's last side, and I didn't expect you guys to rush to deliver me transportation. Yen Lv looked at a row of guns pointing at him and smiled warmly. Do you think I should thank your whole family? PS1 is updated daily at 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. PS2, slow heat in the early stage. Friendly suggestion. After reading Chapter 51, the second small dungeon, decide whether to follow the article or not. Laughs. PS3, the protagonist is portrayed as half-crazy, with no ambiguity in major matters and intermittent nervousness in minor matters. In addition, more traits are welcome to read the article. PS3, in addition to the main character, many important supporting roles also have their own growth lines. A righteous envoy may turn black, and a foolish and sweet person may also become a hero. End of this chapter. Do you believe in extraordinary phenomena in Chapter 2? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Do you believe in extraordinary phenomena in Chapter 2? In the hospital. Yen Lv gently pushed open his father's ward door. There were many people around the hospital bed, including busy doctors and nurses, serious lawyers, and concerned group directors and executives. However, when he arrived, everyone consciously gave way and allowed Yen Lv to walk in front of his father. His father, Yen Rong, had many infusion tubes and monitoring equipment inserted into his body, but he was still in good spirits. Now he smiled and waved at him. Come, sit here. Yen Lv pressed his father's restless hand and sat down by the edge of the bed. He felt the weakening pulse sensation on his fingertips, lowered his eyes slightly, and looked seriously at his father's face, with concern in his eyes, as well as doubt and confusion. It is only in front of his father that he will restrain his violence and arrogance, revealing his ordinary image as a son. Yen Rong on the hospital bed smiled before he spoke. I know you have many questions, don't worry, I still have some time. Let's finish the necessary procedures first. Yen Rong, who was still a middle-aged man at his age, turned his head to his confidants and legal team and said in front of the already set camera, I, Yen Rong, have made a will with clear mind and free will. After my death, I am willing to leave all my property to my child Yen Lv and designate him as my sole heir. The above will is witnessed by Michelle Law Firm. The will shall take effect immediately. From then on, Yen Lv became the sole heir to a vast inheritance. After completing the necessary procedures, everyone in the ward came out in unison, leaving the last time for the father and son. Do you know what you're about to inherit? Yen Rong smiled with a pale face. I know. Yen Lv's voice was a bit low. I will inherit the Cornerstone Technology Group and its countless huge industries, as well as the world's richest position that you have worked hard for so many years, father. My son will soon become the youngest richest person in the world in history. It's quite interesting to think about it. Yen Rong smiled again. The people you saw just now are all loyal backbone members I have selected over the years. You can trust them and seek their help in any future problems. If someone betrays your trust, you can also deal with them as you please. Of course, I believe you can do well. Those old folks must be regretting and provoking you. Yen Lv nodded. He had a feeling that his father was really explaining the aftermath. Father's illness is on the rise. Yen Rong is 40 years old this year, but his physical condition is very poor, including hypertension, hyperlipidemia, high blood sugar, coronary heart disease, kidney failure. He has many deadly or non-fatal diseases. Perhaps it is related to the fact that he has been working in an overdrawn way over the years. All along, thanks to his team of private doctors carefully taking care of him, trying to extend his life. But not long ago, Yen Luge suddenly received news of his father's critical illness and hurried back to see the scene of his father sitting on the hospital bed. On the plane, he read his father's diagnosis and found that his body had developed symptoms of multiple organ failure, which was deteriorating rapidly. A large group of world-class doctors have racked their brains but cannot find the cause. They only predict pessimistically based on experience that if Yen Rong's condition continues to deteriorate at this rate, this world's richest man may not survive tonight. Surprisingly, Yen Rong himself remained very indifferent to the impending death. Perhaps it was because he had a lot of experience in the first half of his life, which made his mind firm enough, or perhaps it was because he had already anticipated. For some reason, Yen Luge felt as if her father had long known that he would die today. "I don't really believe it," Yen Luge said, "I don't really believe you'll just die like this. Everyone dies. But you're different, Dad." Yen Luge looked into his father's eyes. "We all know you're a bit unusual. Not everyone can go from having nothing to becoming the richest person in the world, nor can they possess the ability of a prophet like an prophet. To die today is my own choice," Yen Rong said as if playing a riddle, "just like you have made a choice before." But Yen Lvgu seems to understand. He seemed to be lost in some kind of thinking and stopped talking. "Luge, you are an unusual child. Although you have never been involved in the management of the group, I believe you can manage it well." Yen Rong smiled again. "However, if you don't want to manage it, then leave it to a professional manager and receive equal dividends every year. Money is just a tool for you, you can use it to do things you want to do. Okay. Do you have any special wishes you want to fulfill? Is it related to what you have been doing over the years, such as the Blackstone Research Institute you established using various legal and illegal means?" Yen Luge opened her mouth and wanted to casually find an excuse to explain as usual, but for some reason, she suddenly became annoyed. "Yes," he said, "I believe there are some things in this world that modern technology cannot explain. They may appear under certain laws, or they may only appear randomly. I call these forces extraordinary. As long as we can decipher the laws within them, this power can be utilized by humans. The Blackstone Institute was established for this purpose. In my plan, it will not only become a researcher and pioneer of extraordinary powers, but also a maker and manager of order in the extraordinary world. Even if you haven't found a true extraordinary phenomenon so far, do you think it's necessary to do so?" Yen Rong smiled. The melody paused and the expression became a bit awkward. "Yes. The Blackstone Research Institute he secretly built on the uninhabited island is a place dedicated to collecting and studying various extraordinary phenomena around the world. For example, if a farmer in a village claims to have been kidnapped by aliens and goes to bed at night, why did they move to a city thousands of kilometers away the next day?" After learning of the news, the Blackstone Research Institute dispatched an intelligence department to replace the relatives and neighbors around the farmer. They were undercover for 2 months, and after rigorous investigation and research, it was found that the farmer was a mentally ill person. For example, in a certain program, the old lady claims to be a spiritual medium and can communicate with the deceased, communicating yin and yang. After learning of the news, the Blackstone Research Institute sent an action team to politely, physically, invite the parties involved to come and explain. However, when the psychic mother.in.law saw this battle, she was so frightened that she admitted on the spot that she colluded with the program team to pretend and deceive the audience. For example, there is a suspected winged giant tiger in a forest in a certain area, which was widely circulated on the internet after being photographed by tourists. After expert analysis and identification, it is believed to be a prehistoric mythological creature, kunki. After learning of the news, the Blackstone Research Institute dispatched a fully armed operation team overnight to arrest, but found nothing. Later, network security experts traced the source of the photos and found that the original uploader's PS technology was relatively good, with no trace of P. In short, the Blackstone Institute, which claims to be the world's top research institute for supernatural phenomena, has not only failed to produce any supernatural results in recent years, but has quietly produced a complete set of anti-feudal and anti-superstitious documentaries titled Entering Unscience, which has been warmly welcomed by the general public and laid a solid foundation for the development of the materialist worldview. As the big boss behind the scenes, he felt embarrassed and even couldn't say it. Yen Rong stared at him quietly for a moment, his gaze deep. Why? End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Now I am the richest person in the world. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Now I am the richest person in the world. Why? Yen Lv Go is naturally very clear about the reasons and also understands why his persistence so far is for. But he was just hesitating whether to tell his father all of this. However, in just 2 seconds, Yen Luge made a decision. He doesn't want to lie to a dying person anymore. Although his background is not simple, he has been raised by Yen Rong throughout his life, and he is also willing to acknowledge Yen Rong as his father in the sense of bloodline. Because I know that the extraordinary era is not only a gift for humanity, but also a prelude to the end of the world, said the Yen Luge. Twisted gods will descend from foreign lands, corrupt pollutants will spread everywhere, and undead races will sacrifice to all living beings. If I don't do anything, the world will be plunged into war and chaos, ultimately contaminated by the power of gods, with crawling monsters everywhere, gradually heading towards destruction. Unexpectedly, after listening to him finish these words, Yen Rong did not ask, "How do you know?" or ask, "Is it true or false?" just nodded to indicate that he knew. Their father and son each have some unknown little secrets, and after years of getting along, they have also noticed some abnormalities in each other, but they have always maintained a tacit understanding, never delving deeper or asking further questions. Hee. Yen Rong suddenly chuckled low. Perhaps this is the meaning of my choice. Before Yen Levage could figure out what this choice meant, he heard his father continue to say, "Since that's the case, then I'll leave this inheritance to you too. Compared to vast wealth, it's more precious and special." Yen Rong lifted his hand while inserting the infusion tube and grasped Yen Luge's wrist. Yen Levage was about to say something, but suddenly saw a strange golden symbol floating on his father's forehead, something he had never seen before. This symbol seems to be written in golden ink on the skin, but it doesn't seem to be. After looking at it for a long time, I consciously feel like it's alive, flowing slowly on the skin like water. Yen Lv Go instinctively thought it was an illusion, quickly blinked, but found that the golden ink that made up the symbols really began to flow. It disassembled itself and flowed along Yen Rong's skin like a golden snake, flowing through his neck, shoulders, and arms. Finally, it emerged from the wide sleeves of the hospital uniform and flowed towards the hands held by father and son. Yen Levage felt a chill in his hand, and the golden thread had already climbed up his wrist and crawled out towards his eyebrows. At the same time, my father's deep voice came. "People think that my success depends on opportunities and hard work, but only I know that I rely on systems. 18 years ago, I received it and made a wish to it at the cost of my lifespan, vowing to become the wealthiest person in the world. It satisfied me, so I was destined to die today. But everything was my own choice," Yen Rong said with a smile, watching the golden thread slowly extend to Yen Lvge's forehead, reassembling the mysterious symbol. "It may be a gift from a deity, or a gift from a devil. I don't know. Now I have given it to you. Perhaps you can understand what it is. Don't rush to make wishes, be cautious. But don't be overly afraid, as you think, extraordinary power also has certain rules that can be used by people. I have summarized some rules over the years and put them in the study of the Hanya Forest Villa. You can look for them. Extraordinary phenomena. This is the true extraordinary power that Yanlv Go has been pursuing. The thing he has been searching for is actually with his father. But at this moment, Yanlv Go has no intention of thinking about these things, and there is no time to be surprised or surprised. He clenched his father's hand tightly, only to find it becoming increasingly cold, as if life was passing through it. I originally had some regrets. How could I have made such a foolish wish? Yen Rong closed his eyes and leaned weakly against the pillow behind him. Dad. Yen Rong smiled for a moment, with a somewhat difficult smile, as if he needed to exert all his strength to move the muscles at the corners of his mouth. But unlike the fake smile in business, this smile has an unusual and heartfelt warmth. He raised his hand and gently touched Yen Lujia's hair. Yen Lujia's eyebrows and eyes resemble him very much. This is his child, his most precious treasure. But I don't regret thinking that these things can make my child live a carefree life. Yen Rong quietly closed his eyes and his hand drooped weakly. The golden symbol completely condensed on the forehead of Yanlv Go, and then disappeared into the skin. At the same time, he heard a voice. Detected that the previous host has died. Data uploading is in progress. The original body was not detected in this time and space, and the data cannot be uploaded. Data loss. The system is formatting. New host detected. The system is binding. Hello, the real-time calculation system for destiny is serving you. May I ask what your wish is? What is the price you are willing to pay? Yen Luj lowered her head, staring at her lost loved ones, ignoring the sudden sound in her ears. Yes, he inherited a system. Oh, by the way, there are countless amounts of money, real estate, and equity. Now he is the world's richest man. Cold leaf forest. Due to its geographical location, this place is covered with white snow for 10 out of 12 months each year, with a minimum temperature of over -50 degrees Celsius. The local residents cannot tolerate this extremely cold climate, and there are 5 days of insufficient heating and 8 days of insufficient water supply in 10 days. They have been demanding relocation, but their demands were not satisfied until 12 years ago. A mysterious wealthy man bought their land and gave them a considerable relocation fee. Although I don't understand why some people are interested in this place where birds don't defecate and chickens don't lay eggs, the indigenous people still left happily. The wealthy man who bought an entire forest chose the most scenic place and built a luxurious villa. The roar of the helicopter rotor was close to the ground, blowing a series of scattered snowflakes and steadily stopping on the apron of the mysterious villa roof. Boss, we're here. The driver's voice came from his headphones. Yanlv Go, who had been keeping her eyes closed and focused, opened her eyes and took off her earphones. The external sound is still a bit noisy, probably a mixture of the engine still running and the howling of wind and snow, but at least you don't need to wear soundproof headphones. Okay, thank you, Yanlu said politely, getting up to get off the plane. Come pick me up at 5 p.m. this afternoon. Okay, always on standby. Dressed in a thick fur coat, Yen Luge jumped off the helicopter and was tightly necked by the cold wind. He quickly rushed into the house, feeling better. The room is heated and not cold at all. Yen Luge shook off the snow on his coat, hung it at the door, and walked in. In his past life, he felt that those wealthy people had enough to eat and support themselves. The climate was suitable for sunny places, and he insisted on going to those ghost places that were cold, frozen, snowy, and deserted for 3,000 miles to build a house. Isn't this sick? But after becoming the son of the richest man, he discovered. If the house he built is large, beautiful, comfortable, and has a beautiful scenery, everything from heating to hot water to Wi-Fi is available, and it is very convenient to take a helicopter back and forth. If there is a whole logistics team on standby 24 hours a day, from transportation to cooking, just to deliver a fresh fruit and favorite food when he wants to eat. If there is a whole team of bodyguards who are dedicated and responsible in guarding him, secretly protecting him from being disturbed by thieves, beasts, etc. when he wants to be quiet, and running out to accompany him to drink, brag, and play cards when he is bored. He will also like it very much. It's really fragrant. End of this chapter. The inherited system in Chapter 4 is an intellectual disability. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The inherited system in Chapter 4 is an intellectual disability. Yes, he said that rhythm song is a time traveler, crossing over from the future era and becoming a small baby. He remembers when he first wore it, the technology tree of this era had just developed to the early 21st century. At that time, he was still holding a baby bottle while brainstorming how to use his knowledge to make a living. As a result, before he had a chance to make a career, he looked bewildered as his father's company, Jigong Town-a Village Technical Company, Limited, created a bunch of black technologies and expanded from a township enterprise to a first-class domestic enterprise through patent authorization. At the age of 8, an internationally renowned enterprise used its strength to bypass a patent barrier and fought against its father, causing chaos for their company, Jigong Town-a Village Technical Company, Limited. However, after a series of business wars, verbal abuse, and lawsuits, the rival company was acquired by his father. By the time he was 12 years old, his family's Jigong Town-a Village Technical Company, Limited had become the world's largest multinational corporation spanning industries such as biology, energy, computer, military, aerospace, materials, etc., and finally changed its name to Cornerstone Technology Group, Company, Limited, abbreviated as Cornerstone Technology, under the threat of death from all the management of the company. As a result, his father became the world's richest person. He also won the title of the richest man by lying down all the way. Apart from sincerely shouting, 666, what else can he say about Yanlov-gu? What else can he do with Yanlov-gu besides desperately holding on to his father's thigh? Yen, Salted Fish Walker, and LV-gu have always felt that compared to himself, his father is like a cheat. I didn't expect it to be really a cheat. Yanlov walked towards the study, and the sound of the cheat came in his ear again. Hello, the real-time calculation system for destiny is serving you. May I ask what your wish is? What is the price you are willing to pay? Yen LV-gu has never paid attention to it. This system only asks every 2 hours. It's like promoting credit cards. It's still artificial intelligence voice sales, similar to those with artificial intelligence disabilities. But Yen LV-gu remembered his father's lesson and ignored it until he received enough information. A father and son of 18 years, if they say they have no emotions, it is false. His mother died of difficult childbirth when she gave birth to him, and his father poured all his emotions into him. At first, Yen Luge, who had an adult mindset, felt uncomfortable, but as he grew up, he gradually recognized this familial bond. He is still grieving for his father's passing, so he doesn't want to pay attention to that artificial intelligence disability anymore. Yen Levage walked into the study and began searching for the inheritance left by her father. There are many books in the study, filled with 8 rows of bookshelves. Compared to books like classics, his father prefers to read contemporary authors' works, so most of the books on the bookshelf are of this type and are frequently replaced by his assistant. The things that Yen LV-gu is looking for naturally won't be placed together with them. He walked up to one of the bookshelves and, facing a fixed position, flexed his fingers a few times in a special rhythm. There is a special cavity inside the bookshelf, which forms vibrations and echoes when struck with different weights and rhythms on the outside. These vibrations and echoes become the password and key to unlocking the dark grid. This specially designed mechanism is difficult for outsiders to notice and belongs to the high-end customized products of Leiden Security Company. Well, by the way, does he seem to have shares in that company? As Yen Luge thought, she put down her hand and quietly watched the dark grid open. The space in the dark grid is not large, and it can only hold one ordinary book. In fact, only one notebook is inside. That's a regular notebook with a cowhide cover. It looks a bit outdated. Turning to the first page, Yen Lavage saw several lines of text written in his father's hand on the title page. Hi, my heir. I have ultimately decided to hand it over to you. Together with the future. Yen Lv turned to the next page again. His reading speed is very fast. There is not much text in the notebook, mainly recording some of the father's experiences after obtaining the system, similar to a diary, and combining these experiences to make some analysis and speculation. It is indeed an unknown computational system, and when initially bound, the host is free to set wishes and costs. Subsequently, it will calculate the most likely way for you to achieve your wishes based on these two factors, and inform you in the form of a task. Tasks are not mandatory, and there are no success rewards or failure punishments because achieving a goal is already a reward for you. Once desires and costs are determined, they cannot be changed. Therefore, be cautious. After setting your own life goals, you can set some phased small goals without going against your wishes. After entering them into the system, they will also be feedback in the form of tasks. The system does not exhibit autonomous consciousness and does not force you to do anything. It is more like a dead object or tool that assists the host in realizing their wishes, although its logical response and computational ability far exceed human AI. If you don't want to use it, just ignore it and there won't be any trouble. But it won't disappear until you die or transfer ownership of it. Regarding the origin of the system, I speculate that the handwriting is not visible, or the handwriting is not visible. No, I'm not sure. I'll leave this question to you. Yen Lv closes her notebook. He has a rough understanding of the inheritance he inherited. Father is right, compared to vast wealth, it is more precious and special. Hello, the real-time calculation system for destiny is serving you. May I ask what your wish is? What is the price you are willing to pay? The system's inquiry came again. Do wishes and costs. Father exchanged his life for wealth. What about him? Yen Luge asked herself seriously. Isn't there already an answer to this question? He closed his eyes and silently recited his deepest wish hidden in his heart. I want to change the future. Change the future. Change the future that has not yet occurred on this timeline. The future he experienced in his past life was not beautiful. For humanity. In that future, there will be great changes in heaven and earth, spiritual energy will recover, foreign races will rise, gods will descend, and humanity will fall from its position as the food chain hegemon. There will be gaps in technology and civilization, and knowledge and inheritance will be sealed off. Some people will blindly and crazily serve them, while others will frantically flee and seek revenge. If the records in ancient books are correct, the initial time for the revival of spiritual energy was in the early 21st century, during the time period he is currently in. He still has time to change everything. Strangle them in the cradle. The system paused for a moment and asked, Your wish has been recorded. What price are you willing to pay? This question is easier to answer. Yen Luge smiled silently. Thanks to his father, he laid a solid foundation for his life and gained the capital to squander. So, Yen Luge said in her heart, my price is wealth. End of this chapter. Chapter 5 System Task. Launch a nuclear bomb. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 System Task. Launch a nuclear bomb. Unlike his ordinary father, Yen Luge has seen many extraordinary powers in the future era. He can roughly guess the origin of the system. This made him very happy. So he used it without hesitation. But when it comes to usage, Yanlvgu only sees the system as a tool in his mind, a tool that facilitates him in achieving his goals. It's about the same status as a commuting vehicle, maybe expensive, but ultimately just an object. In his eyes, it's much lower than the status of a driver. System, set my first goal. To obtain a spiritual energy release point, said Yanlv. The goal has been set. The sound of the indistinguishable system echoed in his mind. The system is calculating for you based on existing resources. The calculation has been completed. Generating task. The task has been published. A message suddenly entered Yanlv's mind, slightly different from the previous dialogue. This task message was generated in the form of text. System task. Launch a nuclear bomb. Task description. Launch a nuclear bomb with an equivalent of no less than 8 million tons into the Kanayalu crater within the territory of the Nile Federation. Task difficulty. A. Level, task deadline. 24 hours. Cost required. 120.8 billion to 138 billion yuan. Task reward. Obtain a spiritual energy escape point. Yanlv. Launch. Launch a nuclear bomb. What kind of ghost is this task? What logic is this broken system based on? It is believed that throwing a nuclear bomb at the Huoshanku can identify the point of spiritual energy escape. Oh, no, it seems that in the early stages of spiritual energy recovery, it can really be done. Although due to future knowledge gaps, Yanlv does not know when and where the spiritual energy initially dissipated. But one thing is certain. In the early stages of the Reiki era, the energy of Reiki slowly dissipated from the center of the Earth's core to the ground, ultimately covering the entire ecosystem of the planet. It is highly likely to emerge from places with frequent crustal movements, such as volcanic craters, seismic zones, etc., but its specific location cannot be predicted. At this moment, the spiritual energy is like a wandering dragon swimming below the Earth's crust, running around irregularly. At a certain point in time, if it happens to swim below the volcano and encounters a volcanic eruption, a portion of its spiritual energy will be ejected along with the lava. But the opposite is not necessarily true. If there is no spiritual energy flowing underground, no matter how big an earthquake or volcanic eruption is, it is impossible to release the spiritual energy. Honolulu volcano is an active volcano. An active volcano that has entered a dormant period. The last recorded eruption was 107 years ago. According to normal circumstances, even if there is spiritual energy flowing under the volcano at this moment, it is unlikely to be ejected. But if he throws a nuclear bomb and explodes it, it's hard to guarantee that he won't activate the volcano and then blow up the spiritual energy below. So the inherent logic of this task is actually: if you can't find a point where spiritual energy can escape, just explode it yourself. Yen Luge was holding a mouthful in her heart, not knowing how to vomit. Where is he going to spend 120.8 billion to 138 billion yuan to buy a nuclear bomb to bomb? Even if he can buy it, what about after it's blown up? He went from being the world's richest man to becoming the #1 terrorist, being chased by the world, and heading towards the dark and brutal storyline of seemingly killing countless people but actually saving the world. Or open the dungeon of Fallout 100. End of world immortal cultivation, where all humanity cultivates immortals while fighting mutant beasts on the wasteland. He couldn't help but ask in his heart, "Hey, system, how did you calculate this task?" No answer. Oh, by the way, Dad wrote in his notes that this intellectually disabled system has no operating instructions or help functions, and will not answer any questions from the host. Yanlv opened his notebook and flipped to a certain page. The system will perform calculations based on the host's existing resources and prioritize the task with the lowest difficulty level. All tasks have a theoretical possibility of completion. It will not calculate any other form of gain or loss except for the cost that the host is willing to pay. That is to say, after setting wealth as a price, this broken system will only help him calculate how much money he needs to spend to achieve his goals, without considering whether he will be killed. Will all humanity be killed? It's really a cold system. Yanlovage thought for a moment, then flipped through a few pages and found another rule that his father had summarized in his notebook. Tasks can be abandoned. Only then did I realize that the host can voluntarily give up the task. After the host abandons the task, the system will recalculate and release a new task. However, generally speaking, the difficulty of the new task will be higher than that of the abandoned task. Yanlv fell into contemplation. He lifted the notebook and carefully pinched one of the papers, aiming it at the light source above his head. He is a bit curious to know. Is it his mother, Grass Mud Horse, Gonli Nyang or Mama who sells the batch of painted by his father? When Yanlovage aimed the smudged area at the light and illuminated it for a while, he regretfully realized that his father had painted it too well, carefully covering every stroke and stroke, making it difficult to see clearly. But it's okay. There are the best agents, forensic experts, cryptologists, and psychologists in the Blackstone Institute. It shouldn't be difficult to restore just a few smeared words, right? Yanluge thought happily. He closed his notebook and said to the system from the bottom of his heart, I'll give up this task. It is impossible to throw a nuclear bomb. It's impossible to throw it away in this lifetime. Although the military industry group under his family's cornerstone technology produces billions of weapons and ammunition every year and sells them to different countries and forces, including some less peaceful war areas, in order to earn high profits, they are truly a law-abiding and peace-loving enterprise that never evades taxes. What? Do you say that the weapons they produce have taken countless lives on the battlefield? That's not their fault. The wrong person is not the weapon or the enterprise that produces the weapon, but the person who holds the weapon. Yanluge has always been so convinced. The host has abandoned the task. As the system's emotionless voice sounded, the task, text, in my mind disappeared. The system is recalculating for you based on existing resources. The calculation has been completed. Generating task. The task has been published. The new task of writing enters the mind of Yanlv. System task, Phase 1. Residential. Task description. Stay overnight in your villa located in the cold leaf forest. Task difficulty. A+ level. Task deadline. 12 hours. Required cost. 3 to 66.9182 million yuan. Task reward. Discovering anomalies. Yanlv. Why is the task difficulty of launching a nuclear bomb A level, and sleeping in one's own home for a night A+ level? Is sleeping at home harder than launching a nuclear bomb? End of this chapter. Chapter 6. The Day of God's Descent 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. The Day of God's Descent 1 also, what is the minimum consumption of 3 yuan? Does the minimum consumption of 3 yuan mean that he eats 1 meat bun per meal on this day, and each meat bun costs 1 yuan? Or let him eat 2 white mantou worth 0.5 yuan each meal? As the world's richest man, how could he be so stingy? How was the highest consumption of 66.9182 million yuan calculated? Although it feels like this task is even more confusing than the previous one. At least throwing a nuclear bomb really has the hope of blowing up a spiritual escape point. After squatting in my own house for a day, it doesn't seem like I can find a spiritual escape point. But after thinking for a while, Yanlov still hasn't given up on this task. According to his father, all the tasks assigned by the system have a possibility of completion. He would like to see how this broken system is planned for him to complete. Yanluge made a decision. He walked out of the study and started calling, Xiaolu, I've changed my mind. I'm planning to stay here for the night. Come pick me up tomorrow. Okay, boss, always on standby. After calling his bodyguard and assistant separately, Yen Levage thought for a moment and then dialed the Blackstone Research Institute located on a small island overseas. His communication phone and communication satellite were both independently developed and manufactured, using the latest quantum encryption technology at no cost, and humans have no means to crack them. There was no ringing, and as soon as the phone was dialed, the other person answered. Identity authentication successful. Director, please indicate. There was no nonsense on the other side. Send someone to Hanya Forest, I am personally responsible for the U0 level incident, said Yen Luge. The U0 level event is currently the highest level extraordinary event, roughly the major task of investigating the point of spiritual energy escape. If the conflict level goes up, for example, directly confronting super life or even gods above star level in war missions, it is not something that ordinary troops composed of people can complete. We need to wait until the number of super people increases before considering it. Received. The advance operation team is expected to arrive within 2 hours, and the follow-up personnel are expected to arrive within 6 hours. There is still no nonsense. No matter how disappointing the research results of the Blackstone Institute have been so far, no matter how much ridicule it faces, it is a quasi-military organization with the world's top scientific research capabilities and mobility. Thanks to the unwavering commitment of Yanlvj to providing it with the most abundant funds and the most luxurious equipment. For this reason, he was regarded as a secondary disease, a spendthrift, or even a delusional patient, and even many people within the research institute thought so, but Yen Luge paid no attention to it. As long as they work diligently and responsibly, they can afford the high salary he pays. On the day of spiritual revival, the Blackstone Institute will become his powerful support, standing at the forefront of fighting against divine invasion and defending human will. By then, all the mockery and questioning today will become synonymous with foolishness and short-sightedness. Yen Levage nodded satisfactorily and said, by the way, there's one more thing. Please instruct the director. Can you help me figure out how much this operation will cost? I can't afford to miss even one bun. Opposite. The Advance Action Team of Blackstone Research Institute stood in front of Yen Luge 1 hour and 40.1 minutes later. The headquarters of the Blackstone Institute is located on the Blackstone Islands in the ocean, without contact with the outside world, but has small bases around the world, with a small number of operational personnel stationed year-round to respond promptly to extraordinary events. From a global delivery perspective, the response time of 2 hours is actually very fast, faster than most countries. After all, most of the time is spent on the road. A preemptive action team consists of a total of 16 personnel, each with the ability to independently investigate and handle simple extraordinary phenomena. It's not the second-hand goods of retired soldiers from XX country, but the elite soldiers trained by Blackstone Research Institute themselves, who are at their peak in both physical strength and willpower, and are absolutely loyal to him. The last one is the most important. When 16 fully armed elite soldiers stood at attention and saluted you in unison, it must be said that there was still a great sense of achievement. Yen Levage's lips slightly curled up, bowed back, and then changed back to a serious expression, saying, there may be a spiritual energy escape point here, predicted to be a U0 level event. Who is the captain? A tall soldier stood up and said, me. What's your name? Rhoda. Very good, the command has been temporarily handed over to you. Search this villa and then investigate the surrounding forest with this villa as the center. Yes. Rhoda said without looking askance, Sir, Tina, the head of the finance department, asked me to bring you a message. What words? Rhoda repeated word by word like a robot. Tina's supervisor's original words were. The cost of this operation is 66.9182 million yuan, and after spending it, there is only 0.25 yuan left on the account. Are you ready to withdraw your investment? Yen Levage's mouth twitched and pretended not to hear anything. He nodded solemnly and said, I know. Let's take action. The system requires him to stay in this villa for one night, and Yen Luge believes that this request is not unreasonable. This villa must be the key to finding the escape point of spiritual energy. But he doesn't know whether this key will appear inside or outside the villa, so he might as well let professionals search for it first. The notebook left by his father has been put back into the dark box by him, and Yen Luge is not worried about being found. It's okay even if it's found out. Yen Luge will only heavily praise and reward this great detective, elevate his level of confidentiality, and then turn around to scold the group who designed the dark grid, ordering them to quickly design a new safe. His father was worried about being dissected and kept the secrets of the system hidden for a lifetime, not even daring to reveal his own son. He was not afraid. Who dares to dissect him? First, ask his company if they agree to the intercontinental missiles and aerospace ships they produce. Yen, the domineering CEO, and Luge thought leisurely. After dinner, Yen Luge left his work to others, and then he lay on the couch in front of the French window, enjoying the beautiful night view outside the window. Unfortunately, the entire operation team did not gain anything, and the operation team in the villa was unable to find his notebook. Well, I'll give the expert in designing dark grids a raise later. Rhythm, song, and thought. But suddenly, Yen Luge's face changed. 12 hours had just arrived, but the text in his mind suddenly updated. The first stage task has been completed. The second phase task has been released. System task, phase 2. Escape. Task description. Escape from the threat of gods. Task difficulty. SSS level. Task deadline. 68 seconds. Cost required. 30 million to 96 million yuan. Task reward. Discovering a spiritual energy escape point. Looking at the task with a time limit of 68 seconds but a difficulty level of SSS, the cold sweat on Yen Luge's forehead brushed down. He suddenly realized something. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. The Day of God's Descent 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. The Day of God's Descent 2. At the same time, a mournful scream suddenly came from outside the observation deck where he was located. Before he could react, the door was suddenly knocked open. Rhoda stood with a person. No, it was half a person, stumbling and running in, leaving a long trail of blood behind. And the comrade he was holding had his right half of his body cut off in unison, and the section was very neat, as if it had disappeared out of thin air. When he was framed in, he was already exhausted, spewing out a mouthful of blood, and the remaining half of his body fell heavily to the ground. Through the open door, Yen Luge saw an even more tragic scene. A part of the villa where he is located has been cut off. From the roof to the walls to the ground, it was as if it had been cut off neatly with a very fast knife. From the cutting position, it appears that the entire villa may only have a complete room in the corner of the observation deck where he is located. And the person who happened to stand under the scissors during the cutting was unfortunately cut in half. The person who lowered their head happened to have their head cut off, leaving only a headless body lying on the ground. Most of the people lying on the ground searching for things have disappeared, leaving only 2 feet in shoes. The person standing on the dividing line was cut off half of their body and swallowed in pain. Space cutting. Space angle technology. Yen Luge quickly spoke out the knowledge in her memory. Gods reside in secret realms, but sometimes they use space angle technology to open the door of the secret realm, connect 2 spaces, and then descend. The secret realm of the gods and the sea blue star they are in are 2 different spaces, usually independent of each other. But God can only use a special method to cut off one corner of the space on the blue ocean star, overlapping and crossing the 2 spaces. This is the door to the secret realm. With their ingenious manipulation of space, people in the early stages of spiritual revival cannot predict or even notice that this space has been cut. In the first stage of the A+ level, living, task, he seemed to have easily passed it by eating, sleeping, but that was because he was lucky enough to stay outside the space corner. And the second stage SSS level, escape, mission, do not look directly at the appearance of God, do not listen to God's voice, do not touch God's body, said Yanloj in a low voice. These 3 sentences are written in the Employee Handbook of Blackstone Research Institute and are also his experiences brought back from the future era. But it is difficult to understand the meaning of a deity without facing it directly. In that moment, gods descended. His image is a creature with a human head, a horse body, tiger stripes, and wings, riding on auspicious clouds and stepping into the air. With each step, green grass grows from under his hooves, and when his wings open, light feathers fall. He is beautiful, powerful, and noble, perfectly fitting all human descriptions of gods. He is already a deity. When Yanloj's gaze fell on him, there seemed to be a strange and twisted perception coming from a distant place. It was not something that the 5 senses of humanity could touch, but it was felt by him and flooded into his brain. Yanloj gritted her teeth, suppressing the piercing sensation that surged into her head, and did not let herself fall. But next to him, Rhoda, who also faced the deity directly, let out a crazy scream, throwing her head on the ground with both hands and rolling in pain. There are still 63 seconds left. Yanloj did not fall. He saw the deity take another step forward, and small pink and white flowers bloomed in the grass under his hooves, with a fragrant fragrance. Me regardas lardanon de la Dioj. He said softly, his voice soft and elegant like the sound of a spring. Rhoda, who was rolling all over the ground, suddenly knelt down on the ground, his painful expression fading away, revealing a fanatical and twisted expression. He shouted, Me regardas lardanon de la Dioj. With his fervent words, his body began to swell and twist, his coccyx lengthened into a long tail, his fingertips closed and turned into hard hooves like a horse's hoof. Gray-yellow hair quickly sprouted from his pores, covering his entire body, similar to the deity in the sky, but the fur was rotten and purulent, emitting an unpleasant odor. In the blink of an eye, he turned into a rotten pollutant that was half human and half beast. Yanloj is equally uncomfortable. Unimaginable and extreme pain enveloped him. Yanloj trembled all over, drained of his strength by the pain, and stumbled to the ground, his fingers tightly gripping the ground, causing his nails to turn white and crack with force, but he still gritted his teeth tightly without making any sound. There are still 58 seconds left. The strange and chaotic prayer of Me regardas lardanon de la Dioj echoes once again in the void. With a muffled sound, the rhyme song. The power of pollution is beginning to invade. His body and body, like Rhoda, began to mutate. Mental distortion leads to madness, bones are crushed and reassembled, muscles are ground and bonded, and skin is torn open and stitched together. Dirty and decaying hair is emerging from his arms, torso, and face. The bones and muscles are gradually losing their human form after being crushed and reconstructed. Every second is agonizing to the point of madness. Yanloj felt her consciousness gradually blur. He has been living too comfortably for the past 18 years. Want money, have people, have whatever you want. Everything you enjoy is top-notch. There are no high and dangerous gods, no crazy and twisted believers of gods, and no extraordinary life that hunts and kills humans. Really, it's too comfortable. He was so comfortable that he almost forgot about the darkness and despair of the future era. Do not look directly at God's appearance, do not listen to God's voice, and do not touch God's body. In the minds of mortals, if they violate any of these principles, they will be contaminated by them and become corrupt pollutants, fanatics of gods, and traitors to humanity. This is the experience that humans have accumulated with death and blood in their past lives. There are still 55 seconds left. The gods in the sky seemed to sense the anomaly here, and he gently turned his head to look at the fanatical believers who had been contaminated by himself. And the struggling rhyme song. God only saw the words and songs on the ground, and also saw the monsters contaminated by him. He will not sympathize or appreciate monsters that have been contaminated by himself. Gods are inherently high, and all things in the world are like dust and ants in their eyes. It was only because of the strange human who looked ordinary and saw himself, but was not contaminated, that he turned around and took another look. His gaze was calm and crazy, compassionate and indifferent. Yen Luge was in a daze, and his consciousness fell under the traction of this gaze. Pollution is eroding. The spirit is twisted. The body is distorted. There are still 50 seconds left. But suddenly, a peculiar silver-white flame ignited on Yen Luge's body. The flames burned from the inside out on every inch of his skin, causing even more intense pain. But miraculously, wherever this flame burned, the traces of pollution began to gradually fade away. Another force is beginning to revive. Revitalization of spiritual energy. The prayers used by the gods in this book are derived from a truly existing language, Esperanto. Esperanto is not a natural language that evolved with human history, but an artificial language created by humans in modern times. Its grammar and roots combine the characteristics of multiple languages, making it very interesting. I won't go into too much detail about language issues here. In short, when I see words and phrases that I don't understand in the text, they represent the frantic prayers of the gods. I usually don't do translation, but when it's necessary, I will translate it. Laughs. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. The Day of God's Descent 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. The Day of God's Descent 3. Spiritual power itself has the characteristics of suppressing and purifying pollution. In just 1 minute, Yen Luge awakened his extraordinary abilities and gained the ability to resist and suppress pollution. There are still 10 seconds left. In the burning of this silver-white flame, the distortion on Yen Luge's body slowly came to an end, and even slowly reverted back to human form. Pain beyond human imagination enveloped him, but the melody still remained silent. In the darkest and most desperate times, he remained silent, and there was very little in this world that could shake him. Compared to the pain of being eroded by pollution, it is actually the pain caused by his own silver-white flame burning that is even greater. That is an extreme pain that directly affects the essence of the will, unable to escape or resist. But he imposed this torture on himself, unwilling or unable to stop. If he stops, he will be eroded by the polluted power of the gods. Two forces are repeatedly tugging at each other. After an unknown amount of time, the physical and mental changes finally came to an end. Yen Luge gasped for breath and lay on the ground with a faint smile. There is still 1 second left. Yen Luge, who was burning silver flames on his body, reluctantly lifted his head and the scene before him changed. The god who is half human and half beast in the sky is still there, but he is no longer beautiful. Half of his face remained handsome, while the other half revealed bright red muscles like a severely burned patient. His fur is still smooth in some areas, but in others it keeps growing bulges. When the bulges grow to a certain extent, they burst open on their own and discharge sticky yellow-white pus. His slightly open wings are as white as snow, but upon closer inspection, the white ones are actually a dense layer of maggots crawling in and out between their wings. This is the true deity. Gods are decaying. He transmitted the power of decay and distortion to everyone who saw, heard, and touched him. He flapped his wings far away, gentle as a gentle breeze, and ferocious as a ghost. His figure suddenly disappeared. The task has been completed. The system sound sounded. Yen Luge lay on the ground as if losing strength, panting heavily. There was a strange roar coming from behind. A monster contaminated by gods is slowly approaching him, trying to tear all living creatures to pieces. At the last second, Yen Luge rolled and avoided, then squatted on the ground, pulled out his gun, and raised his hand to take a shot. Bang! A bullet hole appeared on the forehead of the pollutant, and the corpse slowly fell to the ground. Yen Luge still held his gun and looked at it coldly, his gaze no longer lost. The pollutant on the ground has not died. Ordinary weapons cannot kill pollutants. The bullet hole in its eyebrow is wriggling and squeezing out a sticky, grayish-white, tofu-like fluid. That's its brain. Before slowly healing. Only the extraordinary can resist them. The Yanlv Song, who was already a superhero, had a way to deal with it, but he wanted to keep an experimental object and did not kill it. Yanlv reluctantly stood up and did not shoot again. Instead, he took a long metal rod from the side and fiercely inserted it into the monster's chest, nailing it to the ground. Then he found a bundle of chains and tightly bound its limbs and body. Pollutants are troublesome, but they are not powerful. Ordinary people cannot kill it, but it is enough to imprison it. Opening the door of the observation deck, Yanlv found that the large villa he had once cut off had returned. After the deity left, he pasted the cut space corner back. And during the spatial shearing, unfortunately, all the people located in that corner of the space died. Those people were moved somewhere by the gods, and in just over a minute, it seemed like they had experienced a fierce battle, but in the end they were defeated and their entire army was destroyed. Some people seemed to be fighting against some kind of large beast, with bite marks all over their bodies and some of them disappearing. Some people seem to fight against extraordinary creatures that use flames, and their bodies are completely charred. Some people seem to be fighting against something even more eerie, with their bodies turning into a pile of white-haired, aged corpses. The scene was extremely tragic. The ground was covered in bloodstains, limbs, and corpses. Words, rules, and songs remained silent. These deceased people were all his subordinates. 2 minutes ago, they were still chatting and laughing, but 2 minutes later, they had to face life and death. If possible, he doesn't want to see anyone die. This intellectually disabled system provides a range of required costs. But he didn't expect that these money would actually be a pension. He just wants to find a spiritual escape point, bring back some heavenly and earthly treasures, and become a superhero as soon as possible. This rundown system has sent him to the mouth of the deity. After calming down, Yanlv walked out of the villa. Stepping on the thick snow, Yanlv couldn't help but shudder. It's very cold outside. In the past, the wind and snow in the Hanya forest would freeze to death every year. I hope he won't be the next one. You should know that although he has been inheriting the inheritance for several days, as the youngest richest man in the world in history, he has not yet appeared on the front page of the newspaper. Those unscrupulous newspapers are serializing his childhood experiences, teenage experiences, marital status like serialized novels if he were frozen to death here, as the world's richest man with the shortest life in history, the world's richest man who died the fastest after inheriting an inheritance, and the world's richest man who died the fastest after inheriting an inheritance but no one else continues to inherit it. He probably wouldn't want to make headlines for the next year. The picture is too beautiful to imagine. Wrapped tightly in a fur collar, Yanlv restrained her emotions and stood in the courtyard in front of the villa door. She turned on her flashlight and began to observe the surrounding environment. Soon, she discovered a miraculous scene. The Hanya forest is located in the cold zone, where the plants are mainly cold-tolerant coniferous plants such as fir, spruce, and larch. In addition, it is a mossy plant that has low nutrient requirements and can tolerate various harsh environments. And now, the dormant coniferous plants not far away suddenly burst out with an unexpectedly vigorous vitality, starting to grow, sprout, bloom, and bear fruit at a speed visible to the naked eye. Yanlv even saw a broken dead branch, slowly growing green leaves and roots at this moment. Undoubtedly, it was influenced by spiritual energy. Yanlv revealed a faint smile. Even if there is only a trace of spiritual energy, it is enough to cause earth-shattering changes to the nearby environment and creatures. Yanlv closed her eyes and began to absorb spiritual energy. Every breath he takes now is filled with spiritual energy. When in an environment with a sufficiently high concentration of spiritual energy, every breath is a natural practice. Staying in such an environment for a while, even ordinary people can become extraordinary. Just look at the mutated flora and fauna around them. This is the instinct of life. Under the deliberate control of Yen Lv-Gu, the spiritual energy sucked in was stored and condensed into small crystalline substances of the same size as mitochondria in his bones, muscles, and blood. The spiritual crystallization within his body is something called life mimicry, which is his fundamental ability. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Forest Lost Killer 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Forest Lost Killer 1. There are many ways to use life mimicry. For example, the extraordinary ability to analyze and mimic others. His appearance did not mutate like the surrounding plants, nor did he suddenly develop any extraordinary abilities. On the current blue ocean star, there are not many opportunities to directly absorb spiritual energy. Generally speaking, such a rare opportunity only occurs when one is at the point of spiritual energy release. But spiritual energy does not dissipate anytime and anywhere. When the underground spiritual energy flows away, the escape of spiritual energy will stop. This will revert back to the same, lifeless, environment as elsewhere. Yen Luge smiled silently. About 10 minutes later, the crystals inside Yen Lv-Gu stopped condensing. This means that the spiritual energy underground has already flowed away. Yen Lvage breathed a sigh of regret, opened her eyes, and once again observed the plants in the surrounding forest. These coniferous plants, apart from growing relatively quickly, do not seem to have any special abilities, nor do they show a tendency to attack them. That's right, they used to be just obedient plants that didn't have time to develop self-awareness and aggressive tendencies. If this place is filled with carnivorous plants such as flytraps and pitchers, it would be dangerous. Those who are inherently aggressive may expand their recipes to include humans when stimulated by spiritual energy. It doesn't seem so cold anymore. It's not an illusion. Yen Lvage felt the snow beneath her feet becoming soft. As if recalling something, Yen Luge crouched down, uncovering the melting snow and revealing the mossy ground below. When Yen Lvage reached out to stroke the furry dark green moss, he found that they were heating up. Warm moss. The warm moss emits a temperature of about 40 degrees Celsius, which is not too hot and warm, making it very comfortable for the human body. In the memory of Yen Luge, there are also similar heating plants. Some people living in cold places will plant them in their homes, like carpets, which can make the house warm without consuming any energy. If warm moss can be cultivated and planted on a large scale, it will definitely become a very popular commodity in this era. The thought flashed through Yen Luge's mind. System, set a new goal. To find the most valuable extraordinary creatures in the cold leaf forest, Yen Luge said silently. The creatures that have undergone mutations under the influence of spiritual energy are extraordinary creatures, while those that have been living in an environment without spiritual energy are ordinary creatures. Whether it belongs to the extraordinary or not has nothing to do with combat effectiveness. The mutated weeds in the forest, even if they have the ability to dance, may still be unable to escape the fate of being eaten by ordinary rabbits. But rabbits that have gnawed on spiritual weeds become extraordinary creatures. The logic is simple because spiritual energy is conserved. Weeds absorb the escaping spiritual energy, which, if not unexpected, will always exist in the weeds. After the rabbit digested the weeds, this part of the spiritual energy was transferred to the rabbit's body, making it an extraordinary creature. This classification method is simple and rough, but it is useful. The goal has been set. The system is calculating for you based on existing resources. The calculation has been completed. Generating task. The task has been published. System task. Unexpected visitor. Task description. Several lost travelers are trekking in the dark forest. They are cold, hungry, and afraid. Would you be willing to save them? Task difficulty. Level E. Task deadline. 12 hours. Cost required. 0.6 yuan. Task reward. Some valuable extraordinary creatures. Yen LV Gu. Dot. What are these rotten systems up to? Just as he was thinking about it, Yen Luge suddenly heard a faint shout. Help, help. The sound came from the distant forest. Linya and her companions were running in the dark forest, cold, hungry, and afraid. She regretted it. Regretting not camping with friends in this desolate and terrifying place. She has seen a set of photos taken online in the cold-leaved forest, featuring a serene coniferous forest, pristine snow and ice, a mirrored ice lake, cute reindeer, cute snow foxes, furry snow rabbits, and handsome falcons. She fell in love with this beautiful realm of the sky all at once. Taking advantage of the holiday, she and her friends drove here. Although they have some camping experience, they are all in semi-primitive and semi-developed forest parks, not in places that are deserted for hundreds of miles. After Yen Rong bought this forest, he never took care of it again and still relied on the wild animals and plants to live freely in the forest. So Linya and the others quickly encountered trouble. For example, they didn't expect the snow to be half a meter thick, and their off-road vehicle sank into the snow as soon as it drove in. For example, they didn't expect that most of the dead branches they picked up were soaked in ice water, and even after lighting for a long time, they couldn't start a campfire. For example, they didn't expect that there would be no signal at all in this place, and they couldn't make any rescue calls. For example, they had planned to sleep in the car for a night and then walk out for help, but unexpectedly, as soon as night fell, the trees suddenly came to life and surrounded their car with strange flowers resembling ghost faces. The ghost faces on the flowers grinned as if giggling. Linya and the others were scared out of their wits and crawled out of the car, running away. During her escape, she encountered spruces waving their branches like snakes, long-toothed reindeer gnawing on coyote carcasses, and giant salmon that could fly in the air. Fortunately, her friend Caroline inexplicably awakened a superpower that could spew flames out of her mouth, and fought desperately to bring them to the rear. Only then did she narrowly escape the pursuit. After nightfall, this forest is like a mortal ghost. No, it must be the border between hell and the human world. No wonder no one has ever filmed night scenes of the cold leaf forest. No wonder she has never seen any strange talk about it online. No wonder because everyone I've seen has died. Linya is afraid and cold. When she saw a falcon with a blue ghostly flame burning across the sky, grabbing Lin Chao, who was walking with her, and she was tripped by a vine and fell to the ground, Linya finally couldn't suppress her fear and cried out, "What's entangled with my feet? Help! Help!" Her other friend Nero turned a deaf ear and ran forward over her. "It caught me. Who can save me? Save me!" The flower vine, which came from somewhere, slowly climbed up from her ankle and tightly bound her whole body. "I don't want to die yet," Linya struggled and screamed in agony, coming over. "Help! Flower, it's coming over." The ghostly face flower drooped down, and the blood-red petals grinned a big smile as they approached her little by little. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Forest Lost Killer 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Forest Lost Killer 2. She is only 18 years old, has not talked about a boyfriend, has not traveled to the country she yearns for. I haven't had a chance to hold a coming-of-age ceremony for myself yet, and I haven't apologized to my parents for the argument before going out. I want to live. I don't want to die. It's going to eat me. Linya sobbed. The ghost face flower was getting closer and closer to her, with a huge flower that was even larger than her face. The eerie smiling face cracked and grew larger, eventually turning into a bloody mouth. It slowly closed on her head and swallowed her in one gulp. Linya finally closed her eyes in despair. Between the petals, she vaguely saw a dark figure approaching in the distance, like a fierce beast. "I can't escape it anymore. What the hell are you doing?" Linya heard a voice speaking in a daze. But she was wrapped in petals and couldn't speak anymore. After a moment, Linya suddenly noticed that a corner of the petal was lifted off her face, and a beam of flashlight shone directly on her face. Linya instinctively blinked her eyes and then saw the face of a young man, with a handsome face, but perhaps due to the slight furrowing of her eyebrows, she appeared somewhat indifferent in the darkness. Yenlevage looked at Linya expressionlessly and said, "What the hell are you doing?" Linya's brain is still in a state of extreme fear, unable to speak at all. After thinking for a moment, Yenlevage forcefully lifted the giant flower covering Linya's face and said helplessly, "Didn't you realize that these plants are under your control?" Something is entangled with my feet. She entangled herself. It caught me. She tied herself up. Flower, it's coming. She let the flowers stick to her face. It's going to eat me. She ate herself up. Linya played Gigi amidst the laughter and cheers. The whole process of watching the Yenlu song. Yenlevage suspected that if he spoke a step too late, this mentally deranged woman could really manipulate a naturally non-aggressive mutated fir tree to transform into a cannibal flower and digest herself. There are many extraordinary beings who die on their own abilities. But there aren't many ways to die like this. Yenluge has decided to submit her achievements to a candidate for the Darwin Award. No, she is a candidate for the Extraordinary Darwin Award hosted by the Blackstone Institute. It took Linya 10 seconds to recover from fear and shock. She blinked in confusion, as if she still couldn't understand the meaning of the Yanlov song. Yen Lvge's patience is like teaching a fool. Come, give it a try, tell it, let go of me. This time Linya finally understood. She tried to say, let go of me. The vines entwined around her body suddenly loosened. Linya fell upside down in the snow. From Linya's mouth, Yenlevage learned that there were a total of 4 companions on the expedition together. 5 minutes later, Yenluge found Lin Chao, who had been captured by a falcon burning blue ghostly flames. The latter was hanging on a tree shouting for help, and the mutated eagle got stuck next to him. The eagle had no clue in its heart, had just gained illumination ability and flew into the forest, only to get stuck on the branch with its prey. By the way, Yenlevage also learned about Lin Chao's ability to awaken during times of crisis. To make oneself heavier, so heavy that the falcon could not fly. 10 minutes later, Yenluge found Nero, who had left Linya and fled alone. The latter saw Linya and Lin Chao, who had already died by Yenlevage's side, and now felt that Yenlevage was a devil from hell, and the souls of his 2 companions had been taken away by him. So he waved his hands and rushed over hysterically, wanting to fight him hard. Then he was knocked down by Yenluge's foot. 20 minutes later, Yenluge found Caroline, who was spitting flames to cut them off. The latter, due to excessive physical exertion, fell to the ground and was found holding a charred tree trunk, lying soundly asleep in the snow. Yenlevage glanced at Linya in the team, seriously suspecting that the plant that attacked them at the beginning was caused by this foolish girl. This extraordinary generation is poisonous. What made Yenluge's teeth ache the most was that after he gathered these 4 teams, the system actually prompted him. The host's goal is to find the most valuable extraordinary creature in the cold leaf forest, has been completed. Are these 4 fools the most valuable extraordinary creatures in the cold leaf forest? Okay. A little is better than nothing. Originally, Yenluge didn't want to do this job on her own. But before coming out to save the person, Yenlevage made a video call to the Blackstone Research Institute and spent 6 yuan on the phone for it. According to the scheduled schedule, the second batch of follow-up personnel from the Research Institute should have arrived, but unfortunately they have not yet arrived. After the video was connected, Yenlevage found that the Research Institute was also in chaos. Because all the people sent out have lost contact. Director, to be honest, don't get angry, said the person across nervously. Our transport plane had already flown over the Hanya forest, but suddenly lost contact. When? About an hour ago. An hour ago. When the door to the secret realm opens and the gods descend. Hee. These people were either sent to another space and ended up in one pot, or they were contaminated after witnessing the gods. More misfortune than good, Yen Lavage said expressionlessly, send another group of people over. It's really too difficult to fight against gods with the body of a mortal. There was no other choice but to personally rescue the only survivor in the villa, Yen Luge. However, as he was about to return home with 4 people, Yen Luge realized that he seemed to have overlooked something. His villa is now filled with various dead and curious corpses, as well as a mutated pollutant. He is the only real living person. Is it still possible to silence now? Yen Luge carefully considered it. He felt that he could still be rescued. So Yen Lavage opened the door with 4 people and a calm expression. There is a skull in the center of the living room, and this brave warrior, who knows what kind of enemy he encountered in the alien space, maintains a shooting posture with a gun until death. As if it were a work of art, he walked in with 4 people without looking back. When passing by this skull sculpture, the 4 of them did indeed regard it as a uniquely shaped sculpture. Although it may seem intimidating at first glance, after realizing it was fake, their eyes were involuntarily drawn to it, with a mindset of appreciating alternative art, and they were amazed. In the blind spot of their perspective, Yen Lavage saw half of a body bitten off by the waist next to the windowsill. The scene was a bit bloody, so he silently walked over and pulled the curtains to cover the body. Daily chatter. My book, you can raise it if you want, chase it if you want. At the end of each short plot, I will mark it on the chapter title. Remember to come back and take a look when the time comes. Although the follow-up reading of the new book issue is important now, directly linked to various recommendations, rankings, subscription fees, etc., I still believe that the reader's experience is more important. Allowing readers who are not accustomed to following articles to do so is itself a distressing thing. I can't change the rules on the website, but as an individual, I still don't want to threaten readers with cutting books if I don't pursue my grades, which feels too bad. Of course, if it's a friend who has a habit of following articles or is willing to help me improve my grades, I would be very grateful, really. Especially on Tuesday. Tuesday's follow-up reading is the most important. Let's just follow fate for the rest. But don't just keep it and forget about me, it will really make me sad. End of this chapter.